Ashish and I welcome you all to the session on the New Education Policy 2020. On behalf of the Forum of Concerned Teachers, we have Professor Ramakant Agnihotri as our expert speaker for today. We request all of you to be on mute till we enter into the question answer session. Raise your hand using Zoom for questions during the question answer session. We would also be grateful if all our participants could type their names and emails in the group chat for our record and for other future communications on the coming up webinars of this series. I will now request Professor Ashok Burman, the President of our forum, to further chair and conduct the webinar.
Thank you, Ashish. So friends, a very warm welcome to all of you. This is the third of our series of webinars we arranged on behalf of Forum of Concerned Teachers. Our forum is concerned with different problems in our academic field: literacy, poor standard, and inequity. So our efforts are to help the backward students, underprivileged students. At the same time, we organize meetings, seminars, discussions, and also organize educational surveys and try to identify the problems with which the students and the educational structure as a whole are suffering from. As a part of our venture, we have started this discussion after the new education policy was announced. So here you are with us. Very warm welcome to Professor Agnihotri, who has kindly agreed to speak our webinars on new education policy 2020. We have been trying to focus on the various problems of education, problems of the students. We try to help them with as much possible with our limited resources. We also organize on behalf of the forum seminars, discussions, and meetings. When this particular policy was announced, we decided we have got 8 coordinators. You can see on the posters that we have posted today. We like to discuss in details all the nitty-gritty of this new education policy and to read it in between the lines. So we have been inviting experts for this purpose. Today, our expert is Professor Agnihotri, Ramakant Agnihotri, a former professor of Delhi University, a noted linguistics, and also author of many books. So we like to hear him and enrich ourselves. I request Professor Guna Reddy to give a brief introduction about him.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I deem it a great privilege to introduce today's guest speaker, Professor Ramakant Agnihotri. He obtained his doctorate from the prestigious York, London. He retired as Professor of Linguistics from the University of Delhi. Currently, he is working as Professor Emeritus at Vidya Bhavan Society, Udaipur. He is interested in applied linguistics, morphology, sociolinguistics, and research methods. Along with A.L. Khanna, he edits the Research in Applied Linguistics series. So far, 8 titles have been already published in this series. His books include Crisis of Identity, a socio-linguistic study of sick children in Leeds. This was published by Bahiri, Delhi, 1987. And then Second Language Acquisition, Socio-Cultural and Linguistic Aspects of English in India. And then Hindi Morphology, a word-based description. This was published by Motilal, Banaras Das publisher, Delhi, 1997, with Rajendra Singh. And then Problematizing English in India. This was again edited with A.L. Khanna. And then Noam Chomsky, The Architecture of Language. This was published by Oxford, Delhi, with N. Mukherjee and B.N. Patnaik. And then Hindi, An Essential Grammar. This was published by a London publisher in 2007. He has been delivering lectures in India and abroad. He is also associated with many reputed NGOs across India in the area of primary school education. with his rich experience, is going to enlighten us now. I now hand over the mic to our guest speaker, Ramakant Agnihotri sir. Over to Ramakant Agnihotri sir. Thank you.
The policy has some positive points, positive aspects, which in the form of aspirations. I think, for the first time, there is an explicit recognition of multilingualism and the possibility of using the languages of learners in education, though it's not, because it's not understood properly, it has not been sort of stated properly. The diversity of languages in India has been recognized, and there is a talk about India as a linguistic area. One is, of course, surprised that why they don't talk about India as a social linguistic area also. And even in the case of linguistic area, there is, the insight is not particularly useful. I think it is important that the policy talks about and recognizes the importance of translation. And there is the proposal to have an Indian Institute of Translation and Interpretation. And across the policy, those who have seen the document, there is a sort of celebration of the Sanskrit language and of ancient India. I have no quarrel with it. I think it's good. It is good if it doesn't harm the other causes, and if it helps us to separate the folklore and the blind faith about ancient India and the rote learning that has promoted Sanskrit for such a long time. And if people can turn to, rather than just quoting, a shloka from Bhagavad Gita or a sutra from Panini, if it can lead to a critical awareness of Panini, Patanjali, Bhartrihari, it's not good enough to say, India has given the concept of zero to the world. I mean, we should know more about Aryabhat, more critically about Vedas, Upanishads, or about Kalidas or Parabhat. So if this emphasis leads to that, I think everybody should welcome that. That's the first part. Am I clear?
Yes, very much.
Okay. The second part, you see, I cannot look at the policy in a vacuum, in a kind of a neutral space. So I would like to talk a little bit about the lens through which I am looking at the policy, and everybody can have, his or her own lens. So I think I should spell that out very briefly. Then there are several language issues which I have received from FCT, and various other people, questions which relate to the use of mother tongue, the three-language formula, Sanskrit, issue of English. Everybody is worried about English for some reason or the other, and about whether it's a good idea to have one state, one lingua franca, and foundational level languages, issues of proficiency in two languages, etc. I mean, these are some of the issues. So I'll try to cover these. So beginning with some preliminaries. And finally, I'll talk about very briefly about multilinguality, because that. All right. So the first point that I want to make is, to me, it's an important point that we should not call it NEP 2020, because it is still in a draft policy, because it has not received the assent of the parliament. It has been approved by the parliament, it has not been discussed there. It is important because it is not even clear whether what we had gained through the right to education will still be, legitimately available. That was legitimate and justiciable rights in the 2009 Act. Many people might have missed the rather innocent sentence on page 7 of the policy, which sort of says that the policy wants to track a child from the moment she is born, from age 0 till the age of 18. I mean, she becomes eligible for voting. So not only that, the policy says that a national curricular and pedagogical framework for early childhood care and education, the abbreviation is so long, for children up to the age of 8 will be developed by NCERT in 2 parts. Now look at this. The first part is meant for kids from 0 to 3. Given Abhimanyu, they could have gone backwards, from 0 to 3. And a sub-framework for 3 to 8 years. The rest is already the domain of NCERT. So will the RT be extended from, to include 0 to 5 to 4 and 14? Or it will remain a cosmetic sort of reference. We need to see that. So we need to wait for that. And I think it's important from every point of view. Secondly, it should be obvious that preparing such a document is no easy task. So I don't envy the committee that created this kind of policy. It stands on the shoulders of various other policies and reports and curricular documents. Very powerful, very well written. And I'm not just talking of the NP 86 or 1992. I'm talking of the Right to Education 2009 and the National Curriculum Framework 2005. Not only that, Kothari Commission 1968, Yashpal Committee Report 1993, University Education Commission, much older, to which the 3-language formula goes back, which was chaired by no less a person than President Radhakrishnan, to which goes back the 3-language formula. So, you have to sort of see that in that context. So from the intent, vision, and conceptualization of the proposal to its implementation, the policy, although celebrating India's linguistic and cultural diversity, constantly focuses on centralization and homogenization. This is the crux of the matter, that you have the rhetoric of diversity and heterogeneity, but you have the intent of centralization and homogenization. If our intent is to bring local languages, cultures, and knowledge systems to the center, then the policy should be increasingly decentralized, right? It should be brought to the level of block. Perhaps, and the NCERT, as if we already had NCERT, which was largely governing SCERTs, and we had UGC, which was largely governing, all the universities, increasingly so, stifling them. But now, if I tell you the national level, you will be surprised. I don't know whether anybody has looked at the policy from life. You will have National Research Foundation. You will have National Council for Vocational Education. You will have National Educational and Technology Forum, National Higher Education Qualification, National Higher Education Regulatory Council. You have national testing, although as if we didn't have enough testing. Now we have National Testing Agency, and you have national professional. There is no end. There is no end to these national, missions and foundations and regulatory agencies. So there is an implicit desire, I see, to homogenize it all under the rubric of one language, one religion, one flag, one language. This is sort of, and people think that is how it is in the rest of the world, but which is not true. And a country with the diversity, linguistic and cultural and social diversity of India cannot afford that, should not. It does say later on, okay, thirdly, even for the formulation concerning language, so I come to the language issue, the policy makers face severe and multiple pressures. This MHRD committee works under the shadow of a government which has a brute majority in the parliament and, which does not make any efforts to hide its agenda. Why should it? Sanskrit, therefore, needs to be celebrated in all its glory across the educational spectrum. It should be available everywhere. Even only 24,000 people use it as a mother tongue. there is, of course, the fundamental issue of mother tongue, whatever that means. I wish somebody sitting in the crowd could explain to me what is meant by mother tongue. It's a messy affair. We can get into the details. Because like other documents, this one also does not know whether to talk in terms of 22 languages of the 8th schedule or 121 languages named in the census of 2011 or 780 languages counted by the People's Linguistic Survey of India or 1,652 languages counted by our own census office in 1961. And how those languages were reduced is a long story which most people should know, okay, in the case of Hindi. So that is the issue with Sanskrit, and that is the issue with Hindi and the number of languages. On the other hand, English, the language of linguistic imperialism, with the Constitution, the Supreme Court, and the aspirations of the people behind it, and not only that, it doesn't have 24,000 speakers. It has 260,000 speakers. And the Supreme Court, of course, has granted them the right to be taught in English. Speakers has to be almost talked about in the spaces hidden between the lines. And its association with the global level commercialization and commodification of education is far too important to be ignored. The troubles of the policymakers don't end there. They do need to establish their anxiety about the languages that have disappeared and are likely to disappear. Should they be part of education or not? Wow. So, this is a big question. Or we should spend token amounts of money to document them in the departments of linguistics and reduce them to museum pieces. The policy should also find some space for tribal languages, so they are mentioned. Nor can it ignore various foreign languages, right? Except Chinese, of course. And we know why suddenly it is eliminated from the policy. Similarly, persons with disability and Indian Sign Language demand attention. So, they need to be pleased. The long celebrated but persistently failing 3-language formula deserves to be dealt, in a subtle way. I'll sort of come to that. There are then the recent pressures to celebrate multilingualism and mention power in the context of language. It is not clear at all from the policy, except that that word has been used. It is not clear what do they mean by this word. I mean, there is such a sort of major discourse about the relationship between language and power, but so you can see there are far too many balls to juggle around in the air. And well, nobody should envy this. In such a situation, if you do not ground your inquiry into asking right kind of questions, you end up in confusions and coherent formulations. That is what it does. So that's the sort of preliminary remark about languages. Let me come to the lens that I'm using very briefly. So here I say what we mean by, mother tongue or by a language. Some people always grow up with several languages. Most people grow up with several languages. All people grow up with several varieties and styles and, verbal repertoire. Nobody has a sort of fixed language, right? Frozen language as a part of his or her existence. And tell me this is not the case in the remote villages, you are talking only about the metropolitan cities. It is not true. Okay, the person from the remotest village go to other villages and to the marketplace, and they go to the Kumbh Mela, and they meet hundreds of people elsewhere, so they don't keep quiet. They give their languages and they borrow their languages because, they don't need passports and visas, as I have been saying. As in the case of most earlier policy documents, it again misses the opportunity of asking what is language. Is the concept of a language viable in all contexts? What is it that constitutes multilingualism? Is it an additive perspective that L1 plus L2 plus L3, which means if I know my regional language, plus I know a little bit Hindi, then I know some English, then I know some Sanskrit, I become a multilingual. No, that is not what that is not the contemporary research grounded in modern research, recent research says. So we need to conceptualize language as multilinguality. When we think of a language, we do need to think in terms of a continuum, one end of which is highly systematic and codified in, say, the Paninian or the Chomskyan terms, and the other end, the end we really use in our day-to-day life, is highly fluid and porous. The choices available to a language user in a verbal repertoire and linguistic fluidity is, rather than standardization and codification, now defines language. What is central is code mixing, code switching, trans languages. It always was. It wasn't seen like that. Secondly, you need to keep in mind that linguistic diversity and variability in linguistic behavior is an inherent feature of all social groups at the level of home, neighborhood, school, and classroom. Sounds, words, phrases, idioms, as I said, travel across languages freely. You know, constructs of cartography and archaeology can create nations and states. Even there, you know, the gaze on the frontier doesn't stop, you know, from one side to the other. But still, they cannot freeze the contours of multilinguality, nor can it be done by the emergence and assertion of a nation state. In fact, the movement of migrants and peripatetic people, commingling of social groups, variability of linguistic and cultural behavior in dense populations, and as I said, gaze from the other side on the frontiers, and individual subjectivities of people, they all enrich multilinguality. Let me give you a quick taste. I can give you millions of examples. Let me give you a taste of a 5-6-year-old boy, you know, whose linguistic ambience, you know, in the past 4 years consisted of Hadoti, Mewari, Assamese, Hindi, English, and a few more varieties like, you know, Babli, Mewari. And this is a small sort of chunk that his mother sent to me, you know, only yesterday. They're playing Antakshri. Now look at this. So the mother says, okay, let's play Antakshri. Yeah. So the mother says kabutar, and the child says rat. You know, kabutar ends in ra, but the child says rat. And the mother says tomato, ra. Then the son says run. Mother says null. Son says ladki. Mother says kill, la. And the son says late. Oh na ma, ये लेट ना, इसके तो 2 होता है लेट. मैं स्कूल को लेट हो जाता हूँ और जब मैं बिस्तर में लेट हो जाता हूँ. You see, try to appreciate this. This is what language is all about. That a 5-year-old child recognizing the sound sequence late in both the languages in different ways, you know. So I think this is the potential and creativity of the child. That is what mother's tongue is all about. Not a frozen A language because UNESCO has told us so. Secondly, it will be easier for you to appreciate what I say if you keep in mind that children have an innate potential to acquire languages and linguistic systems and their fluidity by the age of 3 or 4. This is important. Languages are acquired. Again, you cannot teach them. You cannot learn them. They have to be acquired. When your mind interacts with the environment, it gets automatically acquired. But the environment has to be, I'll come to that what kind of environment should be there. This innate faculty must be conceptualized as multilinguality because of the constraints it imposes and because of the fluidity and freedom it allows. Note that all human beings, including the people whom we unfortunately classify as PWDs, persons with disabilities, have this faculty. Absolutely, this is universal. Okay, another issue concerns the standard paradigm, and after that we will come to the issue of, language and policies. Another issue concerns the standard paradigm of education that is contrary to even common sense. It's widely accepted that all pedagogical transactions in a classroom are possible only through a language, a textbook, and a teacher who uses that language, period. I mean, that is the pedagogical paradigm. And people don't want to go beyond that. It is assumed that learners must understand what the teacher says. It does not matter whether they actually do or not. And of course, the teacher has no responsibility to understand what the children are saying, what the students are saying, because there is a diversity in the classroom. This is also related to the question about textbooks in standard languages. The standard argument, oh no, how can we teach in Bodo? It doesn't have textbook. How can we teach in Angami? It doesn't have textbook. For God's sake, people should understand that textbooks are made after teaching, not before teaching. Then there is a whole problem about teaching script. And there is a lot that small kids will be exposed in the policy. Can you imagine? Small kids of less than 3 to 5, will be, now that it is 0 to 3, God knows what the policy will ask the parents to do. You see, people do not appreciate the relationship between speech and script. So 2 things need to be understood here. One, that a 4-year-old child that cracks the sound system or the phonological system, syntactic system of a language, she will crack the script also. Let her look at the texts. Why don't we have this much faith that, she has cracked the, absolutely accurately the phonological system and the, syntactic, the word level structure, the sound level structure of language. The second thing, people need to understand that there is absolutely no relationship between speech and script. People think that, I hope people don't think that Sanskrit will probably be defiled if it is written in any other language than Devanagari, because after all, the script of Devanagari. Sanskrit is already written in 14 different scripts. You can write in any script, any language can be written in any script with minor modifications. Coming nearer to the language issues, let me start with the issue of disability and language. I'm starting with this because, this is the most ignored aspect of all. Lot is said, but very little is actually done. It is, I suggest that able and disabled is not a binary, but a continuum. Each one of us, including the top, the topmost wrestlers, and let us say the most triple, we are located at some point on that continuum. So there is no question of inclusion. That the abled people or the abled world would like to include the disabled world. Marginalized, the point is that the question is one of equity, not of inclusion. Why don't we start saying marginalized, the so-called marginalized, at the moment actually marginalized, including the disabled, would include the rest? You see, this is power, not the power that the policy barely notices. The question is one of equity. All schools and all institutions of higher education should be equipped with all that is needed, including accessible environment, braille, digital and assistive devices of all kinds, and a sign-up. You see, saying that there will be home tutoring and there will be special schools, there will be special classes, I don't know, maybe, in some very special cases. Otherwise, every school should be equipped. Why shouldn't we have, unless you have a signer trained properly in Indian Sign Language in every school, how is that hearing impaired child going to participate fully in the school activities? The argument given is, oh, we don't have a deaf child. For God's sake, you don't have a deaf child because you don't have a signer. That is why you don't have a deaf child. And so on. I can go on about this. The policy, as expected, talks against equity. Says schools, I'm quoting, school complexes will be provided resources for the integration of children with disabilities. You know, I mean, I have problems with this. Recruitment of special educators with cross-ability training. So one will be trained in everything. And for the establishment of resource centers wherever needed. Come on. I mean, it may be needed for you, Mr. Policy Writer. What do you mean wherever needed? This is from the policy. And then, of course, there is the bit about home tutoring. Coming to the mother tongue issue. You see, the mother tongue issue, by which I personally mean multilinguality, that children bring to school, I understand mother tongue only in that sense, is defined in the policy by phrases such as preferably or wherever possible. It's always qualified, preferably or wherever possible. And thereafter, you know, then the mess starts. Because you have not asked the right questions, you have not tried to understand the concept of language and the concept of multilinguality. Then home language / local language / mother tongue / regional language shall continue. So they are all slashes. As I have been trying to say, it is the issue of a language right from the word go that is the basis of all our problems. Why can't multilinguality be the basis of our education? It has now been widely demonstrated across the world, near home in Kerala and Rajasthan, and of course in South Africa, Ethiopia, Australia, and many other places. The issue is simple and has been stated again and again. Learners understand formal concepts best through their languages. Their languages. This is important, not a mother tongue. So let us listen to them. Create spaces for their languages. You know, I like to quote Sapir, who said that when it comes to linguistic form, Plato walks with the Macedonian swineherd and Confucius with the headhunting savage of Assam. Don't go with the word headhunting and so on. The point is that all languages are equal. Why do our policies constantly sing the signature tune? This will be till class 5, this will be till class 8, and this will be, you know, in this the exams will be held, and so on. You know, this is a constant hierarchies. When shall we decide that the only way to empower our own languages is to use them for academic purposes, as languages of knowledge construction and as languages of knowledge transmission? Since the policymakers have not given sufficient thought to these aspects, such rather confused statements emerge. However, I'm quoting, at times in multilingual families, there can be a home language spoken by other family members, which may sometimes be different from mother tongue. I mean, the mother herself speaks, you know, several varieties and several languages. And wherever possible, the medium of instruction until grade 5, but preferably till grade, you see, this is, I mean, this really drives one sick, you know, preferably whenever. The point is that what is at stake is a multiplicity of voices, but you try to push them under the rug. The policy claims to have made a foundational change by replacing 10 plus 2 plus 3 system by the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. You know, things done a revolution. Covering age 3 to 18. For two reasons, this is not so dramatic as it looks. We have had Anganwadis for a long time, and middle class has been sending their kids, and lower middle class have been sending their kids to nursery, LKG 1 and LKG 2. So for years, we have had 5 plus 3 plus 4 for many people. The issue really is whether from a linguistic, cognitive, and cultural point of view, we really need a formal ECCE. I put this question to the audience, to whom I thank a great deal for, you know, coming and listening to me. I should have done that at the beginning. You see, the issue really is whether from a linguistic, cognitive, and cultural point of view, we should push kids to formal schooling at the age of 3 or even before. Where needed, daycare centers, I agree, are welcome. But what about parents who wish to be with their children and can when they are young, say 0 to 5? This is the period in which a child's linguistic, cognitive, and cultural development takes place. Where? In the loving, warm, and care ambience of home, the extended family and the community and the neighborhood. Please note this: the systems, variability, and fluidity of the multiplicity of languages a child encounters during this period are internalized. It is in this environment, for example, in Hindi, a child, for example, would learn whether to use tu, tum, aap in a given situation and what kind of linguistic structures would accompany them. This is an interface of language and culture. This is a sensitive period for the growth and development of multilinguality, which requires an interface between universal grammar and the caring and warm atmosphere of the family and of the neighborhood, not the formal structure of ECCE. You see, I mean, I'm sure many of you know that any country worth its salt, maybe it is Japan or China or Finland or Russia or Canada or Norway or USA or Germany, you name it, they don't send their kids to school before the age of 6 or 7. They want to look after them. Okay? So keep that in mind, and we come back to this if you want. Given the above, it's not clear what will be the consequences of mixing 2 years of formal schooling. And remember, the government is ready for 0 to 3 also. It is not clear what will be the consequences of mixing 2 years of formal schooling, that is classes 1 and 2, with 3 years of ECCE. Rhetorical statements can ill conceal empirical facts. We have enough evidence to show that many who went through ordinary government schools at age 5 to 6 and studied through their own languages did extremely well. Just as we have enough evidence that those who went to 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2 through largely English medium failed in reading and writing skills and understanding of abstract concepts. The authors of NEP are aware, and I quote again, that language determines the native speaker's perception of experience. In particular, languages influence the way people of a given culture speak with others, including family members, authority figures, peers, strangers, influence the tone of conversation. The tone, perception of experience and familiarity, and in fact, the policy says apnapan, inherent in conversation among speakers of a common language, are reflection and record of a culture. Now this apnapan, how will this family level apnapan be created in ECC? Because every child comes from a different family and neighborhood. So we need to think about it. That's all I'm saying. The rhetoric, of course, is, that at ECCE, a child will have physical, motor, cognitive, socio, emotional, ethical development, I'm quoting, cultural, artistic development, and logical thinking. All this will happen. I don't know what will happen later. But this is the time when the child at the home environment is beginning to structure space, figure out the parameters of weight, volume, number, and language, as I explained, the network of relationship in the family, and the socio-linguistic behavior suitable in a particular social group. It is not clear at all at what stage how many languages will be introduced and how. I mean, people have asked me these questions, I have not been able to figure out. What is made clear that two, in the name of plasticity of mind and multilingualism. Now, these are the reason givens. Both are patently wrong. Okay, this is what I'm going to argue. What is that by the grade 6 or 7, that means by the time a student is 11 or 12, she should know 3 languages, and out of those 2 should be Indian. And to make any changes, she should be proficient in at least 2 of those Indian languages. Well, those who know the proficiency levels of the current level, I don't know what this means. It is obvious that in North India, it would be Hindi and English, and in the South, regional language and English. Sanskrit would, given the thrust of the policy, will always come handy as a third language and a useful one to get marks. English and Hindi imperialism are established, and the position of Sanskrit boldly asserted in the policy. You see, Sanskrit has been around for a long time. That is why I expressed my doubts at the beginning. But no analytical and critical thinking about Sanskrit texts has appeared in general. The policy suggests, contrary to all contemporary research, that children pick up languages extremely quickly between the ages of 2 and 8. This is not true at all. In fact, as you grow older, your capacity to learn more languages grows faster. I mean, to me, it seems common sense. You know, you have higher cognitive abilities. Yes, your jaw may be a bit rigid. You may not be able to learn the sound so well, but vocabulary and syntax, you are perfect. There is absolutely no problem. So this is the wrong reason given in the policy. Okay, we may now turn to the good old 3-language formula, whose history goes back, at least as I told you, to 1949, and then to Kothari Commission, which actually followed the consensus among the chief ministers of different states of India. You see, the idea was, what was the, and people still think it would work, okay? That, in North India, in the cow belt, in UP, Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and so on, whole of North, people should learn one South Indian language. And people of the South should learn Hindi. So that was the sort of, finally what, I mean, English, of course, English. Without English, we can't do anything. I mean, it's hidden in every line of the policy. It was, even at that time, as if the East or the Northeast or the tribal belt speaking hundreds of Munda languages did not even exist. Once again, this is the relationship between language and power that creates hierarchy, and which. Why should anyone learn another language? See, generally there are 2 or 3 major reasons. Either I learn a language for instrumental reasons. I'll get a better job. Most people learn English for that, or I'll get a promotion. Most South Indians learn Hindi for that reason. So you have instrumental reasons to learn languages. Or you have integrative reasons. I love French. I want to go to France. I love French people. And I say, wow, I must. So there's an integrative reason. Or you learn a language for joy. I have read, let us say, Greek literature in English, Sophocles in English. I have read Euripides, I have read Plato, Socrates in English, and I say, no, I must read in Greek. I could learn Greek for that. I could learn Persian because I want to read Ghalib or Mir in Persian or in Urdu. So, it's a matter of joy. None of this applies to learning Hindi in Tamil Nadu. Why should a Tamilian learn Hindi? Why? And you see this happening again and again. I don't know how many of you see the newspaper today. I mean, many people were thrown out of a Government of India meeting because they said, if you don't know Hindi, you can switch off. And so Tamil people had to do that. Hindi and English are the compulsory part of TLF. So if you read any version of TLF, they are compulsory. It will always read Hindi, English, and Sanskrit in the north, English regional language in the south. Except for 2-3 states like Sikkim and Jharkhand, you will find only 1 or 2 languages listed as official languages. I was so happy to see that Assam had 9. When I used to work there, as a resource person, they had 9 languages. They printed books in 9 languages. In particular, this I have told you, that they should show proficiency in at least 2 languages. So 3-language formula has been a disaster with a long history of over 50 years. We have not been able to implement it. You see, Tamil Nadu is quite happy. I mean, Andhra is quite happy. Kerala is quite happy with English and with Malayalam, or English and Tamil. So why do you want to push something down their throat? You have not been able to push Tamil down the throat of the North Indians. So in any case, nobody should worry about the dominating future of English. ECCE, the proposal for ECCE will provide a platform for mushrooming of the so-called English medium nurseries, Anganwadis, and Balvatikas. You will see how fast they mushroom now. They're already there, but then, there are comments made about India's languages. Another most unscientific part of this policy, that Indian languages are among the richest and the most scientific and the most beautiful. And that is to persuade people to learn, Sanskrit, because they think Sanskrit is, of course, because, Panini showed its grammar. So then, therefore, it is absolutely more scientific than, as I quoted Sapir just now, that no language is unscientific. No language is less beautiful. No language is less expressive. Okay. No language is without music. Everybody loves his or her language. So I think this should not have been said at all. And then to say that, Sanskrit, an important modern Indian language, is also in the 8th schedule, and possesses a classical literature. So many languages, possess a classical literature. And not only that literature is greater in volume than that of Latin and Greek put together. This is sheer Brahminical colonization. It reminded me of Macaulay saying about India, and he said a single shelf of good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. In addition to high quality offerings in Indian languages and English, foreign languages such as Korean, Japanese, Thai, and a whole lot are mentioned except Chinese. And Urdu is not mentioned even as, thousands of Urdu schools have disappeared from our country. It seems nobody's worried. If you really wish to promote multilingualism, you need to respect the multilinguality children bring to school. Now, this is the basic point I want to make today. And I'll try to finish to give time to people. Maybe need 5-6 minutes more. If you really wish to promote multilingualism, you need to respect the and children bring multilinguality to the school, individually and collectively. All classes are full of different voices. So I am saying give spaces, and I'll show you how. So the linguistic planning, linguistic policies cannot be made top down, they must be made bottoms up. It must start from the block level, from the taluk level, and that is how people should say, oh wow, this is going to work for our kids. This is what makes their geometry clear. This is what makes their algebra clear. This is how they will understand poetry. None of this is happening so far. All of us know that. So all classrooms are by default characterized by multilinguality, giving space to the voice of each child. It is always important that the teacher understand that what the learners say, rather than the other way around. It's absolutely the other way around these days. Okay. the focus is how to push the child to understand the teacher. That is the solitary focus. What I am saying is, even children, I mean, teacher can take 15 minutes, 20 minutes. If rest of the time is given to kids, they can do wonders. And the resources, the linguistic resources that children bring to the classroom, those resources can create the foundations for scientific inquiry, basis for cognitive growth and language enrichment. I have shown this again and again. So grassroots level multilinguality has to be recognized, not L1 plus L2 plus L3. You see, the point is that for linguistic data, you don't have to run around. Okay, it is in the head. Children bring it in their heads. And if you learn, I mean, this should be a part of teacher training. Courses, you make gender, you make disability, other things. I think a course in language, on the nature of language, and a course of using linguistic resources for scientific inquiry should be an essential part of the training programs for teachers, for all teachers, okay? Because language will be used in all the subjects. If you want to show India as a linguistic area, if you want to show India as it is a linguistic area because features are shared across languages, all that children will tell you. You don't have to tell children. You don't have to tell students. They will tell you. Their data will show you that India is a linguistic area. Their socio-linguistic behavior will tell you that India is a socio-linguistic area. So I think so I say it's a basis for cognitive growth, because in the classroom, you can go through all the steps of scientific inquiry. You can have data collection, classification, categorization, rule formation, and hypothesis testing. So I think that is what needs to be done. So I think I will stop there. I have taken 45 minutes. That's what I said I'll take. And I'd like to finish in time. Thank you very much again, all of you, for being here. And I don't know how are we going to handle the okay. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much on behalf of the forum. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
On behalf of our forum, our thanks to you and sincere most thanks to you.